Shalom uvracha to everyone. Usually I record on Thursday morning, but this week I was not able to, and so it's Thursday evening, a few hours before we conclude this very difficult year of 2020. I hope everyone is well. We continue to daven for those who are ill, and we hope that anyone who's had complications in any way can emerge from them whole. We continue to daven on behalf of the whole world. And anyone who's in difficult straits, either economically, emotionally, psychologically, physically, from the challenges of this year. This week is Parshat Vayehi. It concludes Sefer Bereshit. We come to the end of our saga of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We're going to move from the family to the nation in the book of Exodus. And the Bible spends a lot of time in this week's parasha telling us about Yaakov's last days, his, so to speak, living will that he wants to pass on to his children and to his grandchildren, his goals for his children and his grandchildren, and even his vision for the future of the tribes and their existence. Jacob is a revered figure in the land of Egypt, and the Bible spends a lot of time telling us and in detail about the death of Jacob, and that Yaakov insisted that his body would be brought to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, and the Egyptians hold him in great esteem as well, and therefore go in a funeral procession up to Eretz Yisrael. And the Bible describes in great detail that procession, and the Bible speaks of the fact that there were many, many people. And the Bible continues, and it says in chapter 50, verse 11, "Vayispdu sham mispeid gadol v'chaved ma'od." It uses a very interesting term. It says that there was a very, very intense, a great eulogy, mispeid gadol. It's a very rare term that's used. And it's chaved ma'od, and it was very heavy. It was intense, it was significant, it was important, and it was very heavy. It was very, very painful. Vayasla aviv evel shivat yamim. And the Bible says that Jacob was mourned for 7 days. This is what Joseph did. Vayar Yoshev Aretz Saknani, and all the people in the land of Canaan saw this. Vayomru evel kaved zel mitzrayim. Again, the repetition of the word. This is a very heavy, intense, mournful period for Egypt. So the Bible describes Jacob's death and the aftermath of his death in grave terms, describes it as an Evel Kaved. It's interesting that this verse, Vayasla Aviv Evel Shivat Yamim, is seen by one of the Gaonim in the She'iltot, one of the early Gaonic works that becomes part of the rabbinic canon, as the source for Shiva, the way that we experience this, the 7 days of Shiva. According to some Rishonim, it may even be biblical based on this verse. That's one model, the Jacob source for Avelut. On the other hand, there are other rabbinic passages in the Bavli and other places, Yerushalmi, that speak of the institution of the 7 days of Avelus, not based upon the Jacob experience, but the Talmud says, Moshe Rabbeinu tikein lahem liYisrael shivat yemei ha'avelut v'shimat yemei ha'mishteh. That Moses instituted, again, it's not explicit in the Torah, it's not part of the biblical commandment, but it was a takana, Moshe Rabbeinu wearing his rabbi hat, not his prophetic lawgiver hat, and Moses instituted Moshe Rabbeinu tikin lahem liYisrael shivat yemei avelus v'shivat yemei hamishteh, the 7 days of mourning, and he also instituted the 7 days of joy when a chatan and kala, when a bride and groom come together to start a family, to start a new path in life. And it's very interesting to me if you kind of put in opposition these two models of Avelut. The Avelut of Jacob is an Avelut which is described as heavy, as imposing, as mispeid gadol, as evel kaved. It's a mourning that can overwhelm, if I would say, if we want to talk in psychological terms. It's a mourning that's so intense that a person can't emerge out of it. And it's interesting. The rabbis have an interesting midrash. When Jacob was on his deathbed and he was conveying his messages to his children, the Chazal say, Bikesh Yaakov legalot et haketz. Jacob wanted to reveal the future, v'nistalka minu shechina, but the shechina, the divine presence, spirit, left him. And he wasn't able to communicate the future, the grandiose future, the redemption from Egypt. Jacob's life in this rabbinic reading ends when they're enslaved, in the midst of mourning, in the midst of suffering. And Jacob's life ends with mourning, an intense mourning. The horizon is not clear. Nistalka mimenu shechina. Bikesh, he wanted to reveal the future, the redemption of history, but he couldn't do it. Jacob's death represents the Avelus when one is so immersed in the pain and the suffering, one can't even come out of it and see the future. On the other hand, the Moses Avelus, the Avelus that's rooted in the Takana of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's interesting that the rabbis present it, as they say in rabbinic language, b'chad machta, with in one needle, in one phrase, together with the Shiva Simei Hamishta, together with the 7 days of joy that what we call the Sheva Brachas, the week of the Sheva Brachas, that we gladden the heart of the Chatan and the Kala, which Rabbi Soloveitchik and others often pointed to this juxtaposition in the Talmud between the Shiva Simei Avelus and the Shiva Simei Hamishta as a kind of statement about the equilibrium of life, that life is not purely one of pure joy and unadulterated good. There's going to be suffering and difficulties and mourning and death in life, but also at the same time not to become so shakua, so entrenched in the mourning that one doesn't see that there's also life, that there's a cycle. There's life which gives to death, death which brings life, and that mourning has to be part and parcel of the totality of life, the cycle. And I think, we are in this moment in time, in our country, in the world, as we turn to a new year, a year where 9 months have been in the shadow, the intense shadow of the pandemic, and the death and destruction and mourning that we've all experienced, and the fear and the loss. There's a certain level that one has to balance here. On the one hand, and there are times when it's individually and communally, one can feel so shakua, so entrenched in the pain and the suffering and the deep despair that there were moments this year, and kind of not see at all any light at the end of the tunnel, any kates. And on the other hand, there is the mourning that also goes together with life, with the recognition that people have gotten married, children have been born, people have been able to develop relationships, people have gotten engaged, grandchildren have been born, some people economically have been successful in whatever way in their businesses. There's a balance. That's the mourning that recognizes the mourning, but also recognizes the life and the light at the end of the tunnel, which I think many of us are thinking about with the growing possibilities of the vaccine. On the other hand, that is also dangerous, not dangerous, but it's also, one has to really go a fine line that one doesn't get to the point where one is only focused on the end goal, on the finish line. Oh, we have all these vaccines and more vaccines, and look how great Israel is doing, and look at all these things that we can, if we pull it together, we can, and sometimes forgetting the people, the suffering, the pain, the economic, emotional, psychological loss, the challenges, to really balance that there are moments when we're going to have that Avelus of Yaakov, which we can't see the Kates, we can't see the end. We Nistalka menu Shechina, the Shechina has left us. And other than times when we see the Chatan and the Kala, and we see the end, and juggling that, balancing that, living with that, as we continue to go through the next few months, which will continue to have tremendous challenges, pain, suffering, and at the same time, hopefully we will see the end, the Kates, the end and the emergence of the society and our individual lives and the community emerge. And so these are kind of the balance of making sure that we have the mourning, we have the Avelus, but it's an Avelus which is also tempered. The Avelus of Yaakov with the Avelus of Moshe. The Avelus together, that we can honestly deal with those emotions and juggle those feelings and hopefully emerge from them to the book of Shemot, to the book of redemption, what Chazal calls Sefer HaGeula. That's what we hope for in the months to come and the years ahead. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. It was wonderful to see everybody at the Ask the Rabbi session, those who were able to attend, and I enjoyed it. I hope you also enjoyed it. Hopefully we'll have more events in the future. I also encourage everyone, please come to the Havdalah on Zoom. Please come to the davening on Zoom if you can't come in person. Please come to the shiurim that are starting up again this week in Shmuel, as well as the Sunday morning Dvar Torah, and any other possibility of connecting with others in the community, in the shul, with me, and in general. So I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom, Chazak, Chazak, V'nitchazek, as we complete the reading of Parshat Vayehi.